tension between police, protesters, and journalists is in full view. The LAPD declares the scene at Echo Park an unlawful assembly. They say protesters must disperse. That includes homeless who live in the park, and residents, and advocates who support them.
That also includes journalists, like Kalia Williams, a reporter from the Collegian at LA City College.
Kind of recording a little bit of the crowd, just kind of observing, and then I got swept into the crowd. And as I was getting swept, some of the organizers were saying, oh, they're gonna like kettle us down on Sunset. But as we started backing up, they ended up kettling us sooner. And a bunch of cops start coming out of the alleys. And then as soon as they like kettled us, they announced that we were all under arrest.
LAPD officers rounded up journalists and legal observers from the National Lawyers Guild and led them away 2 by 2. Police released reporters from the mainstream outlets like the LA Times and Spectrum Cable eventually, but many journalists who did not have an LAPD press credential went to jail. Olivia Martinez lives in the Echo Park area. She says some journalists who were not detained began live streaming the arrests of their colleagues.
The reason I wasn't arrested is because basically if you were on one side of the street, it was just like luck of the draw. If you're on one side of the street, you got kettled and eventually arrested. And then if you were on the other side of the street, you basically got pushed off the, just these people want to hide poverty. So they're just going to move it somewhere else and think that, you know, works. And because they don't want that in their neighborhood or whatever.
Criticism of the arrests came quickly. The executive director of the ACLU called it militarized police action. Hector Viegra says it was a cruel way to treat displaced persons.
In a statement, he said mass arrests of protesters, journalists, and others would not hide the city's actions. Free speech advocates say LAPD got it wrong.
Our position is very clear under the First Amendment of the United States Constitution, as well as various local state statutes and the state constitution of California. The press should be able to record and document the activity of the police, even during an unlawful assembly when the general public is required to disperse. And we think that's a critical element of the constitutional privileges of the press, because the idea is to prevent potential abuses.
Albert Cerna is a student at San Francisco State University. He writes for a newspaper in East Los Angeles.
So systemically, big like organizations, people in power don't want us to always do our job. They want us to do our job when it suits them, when it makes them look good. But when we're critical or even doing exposure of certain bad behavior, things that aren't necessarily bad, but just not really right, you know, that go against the broader interest of the public, that's when the issue comes in. And as student journalists, you know, we don't have the big legacy newspaper names behind us. We don't have always the ability to sue the people or go to court or take action in ways that big professional publications can. And so we're an easy target.
Student journalists may not have the influence of mainstream media to back them up, but they have rights that the LAPD ignored. It is information that did not make its way to the police frontline, and that needs to change.
There is some disagreement, I would say, actively between the press and the police about certain interpretations of law. And today, we all want to see a peaceful resolution to these sorts of situations. So I'm with the student journalists, but it's important to remember student journalists in this state, by law, have the same rights as all members of the press.
Meanwhile, Kalia spent several hours restrained in zip ties and transported in non-COVID safe conditions for exercising her First Amendment rights. But she says she was not intimidated or afraid. Kalia and others who were arrested found safety in numbers.
I learned what this was that day, but it's basically when police trap you, when they tell you to disperse, but they kind of like trap you in with like no way to really leave.
City Attorney Mike Fier dropped all charges against protesters, journalists, and legal observers. He says there was no reason to arrest peaceful protesters. The outcry against the actions of the LAPD continues as the department considers changes to its press pass policy.
But the question remains, if journalists cannot watch the police, and if journalists cannot watch the government, then who will? This is Matthew Rodriguez reporting for LA Collegian Wired.